Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on Mayor and CAO relationship. Uh, I think we are going to get started. I think folks are still joining us, but that's all right. And before we get started today, I'd like to recognize that our work at AMO and the work of our members takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across Ontario. We recognize and respect the history, languages, knowledge, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous peoples whose presence continues to enrich our communities. For those who don't know me, my name is Lindsay Jones, and I'm the Director of Policy and Government Relations here at AMO. And I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's session, Leading Through Crisis, the Mayor-CAO Partnership in Emergency Communication. So this webinar builds on the solid foundation laid in our first session, the Mayor-CAO Relationship, Building a Foundation for Success. And if you joined us then, welcome back. If this is your first session, thanks so much for being here. You've joined a really important conversation in municipal leadership. So today we're focusing on what happens when the stakes are high, when crisis hits and leadership is put to the test. Whether it's a flood, a wildfire, a pandemic, a cyber attack, or a heat wave, if you're here in Toronto, how a municipality responds can define public trust for years to come. This event is, of course, co-hosted with our friends at OMAA. So Scott, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and to say a few words.
Thanks, Lindsay, and many thanks to you and the whole team at AMO for hosting this session. My name is Scott Folke, and I'm the ED here at OMA. For those of you who don't know, OMA provides professional development services and supports for CAOs and aspiring CAOs across Ontario. Preparing for an emergency is inherently difficult because crises are unpredictable, fast-moving, and often evolve in ways that challenge even the best laid plans. And no two emergencies are exactly alike. Each brings unique pressures, emotional stakes, and communication hurdles that can't always be captured in a manual or a checklist. And that's why it's so great that we can learn from those who have navigated real-life emergencies here today. Their lived experience provides insights that go beyond theory, highlighting what worked, what didn't, and how strong leadership partnerships can make all the difference. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for being with us today. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Scott. So a few housekeeping items before we kick off. First of all, this session is being recorded and it will be posted on the AMO and the OMAA websites to be able to access for those who missed it or for those who might just want to see it again. I also encourage you all to actively engage with the content. So following our discussion, we will be able to take questions from the audience. So please submit your questions throughout the session using the Q&A function located at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. So now on to our panelists. So our expert panel today is going to be taking us through some of the important lessons learned from two real emergencies experienced in the town of Huntsville and the municipality of Red Lake. These late leaders have faced different emergencies, but they share one thing in common, an unwavering commitment to leading with clarity, purpose, and partnership. So please welcome from the town of Huntsville, Mayor Nancy Alcock and CAO Denise Corry. And from the municipality of Red Lake, Mayor Fred Moda and CAO Michelle Hendry. So we're going to jump right in by setting the stage. And we'll start with Huntsville. Mayor Alcock, so what was the emergency situation your community faced and how did it unfold?
Thank you, Lindsay. First, I just want to say thank you to you and Scott, the whole OMA and AMO team. It's a real honor to be part of this session today. So thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. Our emergency was the kind that you think, I hope this never happens to us. It's one of those. It happened on March 10th, 2024. and it was a cyber incident that involved ending up as a ransomware attack, right? And so it's one of those you think, oh, I'm used to floods. I'm used to snowstorms and power outages, and they're all not great to go through. This one, you know, that's the job of municipal practitioners. Is it never ceases to amaze you that the new surprises that can hit you. So this was one of them. And I was informed on the Sunday evening when I was at home, and I was informed that this is the first lesson learned that I would say was really important. I was informed by our now deputy CAO because our CAO was on a well-deserved vacation. And I received a call at home filling me in that we had had this incident and that we were shutting down all network systems, access to software, and the emergency control group had been enacted, and that, you know, it had been identified by one of our IT staff, this irregular activity. So letting me know that we would have an emergency meeting first thing in the morning. So just the thing that I thought in retrospect, it was the seamless transition from our acting deputy CAO to our CAO, who was on the job first thing in the morning as soon as she got back. And it kind of emphasized the importance of having that ability in your administration to be able to respond immediately. You know, and I know when people say, oh, I'm acting so-and-so when so-and-so is away, we kind of take it for lightly. This is one of those moments that it was absolutely critical because I felt, instead of freaking out, I felt immediately like I had the support that I needed, and I was embraced for whatever was going to happen the next day.
Wow, that's a great first lesson, but not a fun call to receive, and
No.
I'm sure not a fun call to have to make as well. Denise, anything to add to set the stage for the Huntsville emergency?
Yes, thanks very much, Lindsay, and thank you again for the opportunity. So I always tell my team, I love it when Huntsville's first. Not in this case. I do believe we were the first municipality in Muskoka that had experienced a cyber attack. And it, as the mayor indicated, it was something we weren't used to. We handle floods annually. We can, handle really bad ice storms and snowstorms. We're prepared for those. But this was something that was really, really new to us. So it was frightening. As the mayor indicated, I was just coming off of vacation. The first phone call that I woke up to on the Sunday morning was, well, actually, there was about 10 phone calls but I didn't get any of them. And it was, you need to call me right away. And we've had a cyber attack. So, pretty much fresh off the plane, no shower, right to work, suitcase still in the back of my car, and to see that this had happened. So the great thing is, unlike the pandemic, where none of us were prepared for that, we actually did have a response plan for a cyber attack. And this was something that, kudos to our risk management team and our IT team, they had put in place. It was a few years prior, and we actually did have a playbook. And that was instrumental into us being able to grab onto it and hit the ground running. That we still had lots of operational roadblocks. So, as staff, obviously we had questions going through our head. How do we contact staff? Our systems are down. So just imagine everything that you can access is no longer available to you. You can't do your group emails. You can't do your teams. You can't do anything. You're totally disconnected. So we really had to put into play very quickly, how do we contact staff? How do we advise council? Do we have our passwords that aren't on our system somewhere, which shouldn't be on your system, by the way? How do we get into this information without our passwords? So we ended up obviously getting through that. Our response plan was instrumental in the success that we did have with dealing with our cyber plan. But we had obviously still impacts. So immediate impacts were no access to our system. Our municipal offices were shut down for a few days. We didn't have availability of our main systems for 3 to 4 weeks. So just try to imagine that. We couldn't access any information. And then it was a question was, what do we do with staff? Because they can't work, they can't get into their systems. So we took it as a never waste a good cyber attack is the words that my staff had said. And we took the opportunity to do full cleaning, going through paper files, organizing. So we did get lots of work done if there is a silver lining. But I think the most thing, and then of course trying to deal with the press and the public wanting to know, and we couldn't tell them anything. We couldn't say anything. But I think for me that was all very, obviously very difficult to deal with, and we made our way through it. But one thing that we didn't take into consideration was the long-term impact. So the long-term impact was it took us over a year to catch up. And the impact that it had on our team, they were exhausted, and they were well over a year past the cyber incident, and they were still feeling traumatized, to say the least, specifically our IT department and our finance team. So I think the key thing to remember, I don't want to say when this happens to you, but if it happens to you, is that you really need to check on your team regularly, because they may seem very strong in the forefront, but you really need to check on them because it's very impactful. So there's just a few.
Wow. Oh, thanks so much. Switching gears then to the municipality of Red Lake, who is no stranger also to needing to roll with some of these punches. Mayor Fred Moda, hoping that you're able to pick one of the various emergency situations that Red Lake has faced during your tenure as mayor.
Great. Thank you so much, Lindsay, and thank you to yourself, Petra, Scott, and the AMO team for asking us to be part of this panel this morning. We've had a number of emergencies during my 2 terms as mayor. Going back to 2020, we had a full community evacuation for a forest fire, evacuating 5,000 people in less than a half an hour. 2021, we had another forest fire encroaching on our municipal boundary again, and we were in a state of emergency. The year after, we had flooding. Earlier this year, we had a natural gas leak. And 2 weeks ago, we had something unique, which we're going to speak about this morning. And the unique emergency that we dealt with was being notified by Emergency Management Ontario, contacting our community emergency management coordinator at 2 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon that Sandy Lake First Nation, which is to the north of Red Lake, is evacuating their community of 4,000 residents, and we were the closest airport. So keep in mind, we are not a designated transportation hub or an evacuation center site, but we were the closest airport. So what happened after that? Planes started arriving with people about 4 p.m. Saturday afternoon. And the premise of this was people would be transported on commercial airlines once they've arrived in Red Lake to their destinations, whether it was Thunder Bay or going beyond to Niagara Falls, Cornwall, different areas of the province, so these people could remain safe and with their families. Well, throughout the course of the day, we received almost 570 evacuees into our airport, and 1 commercial flight arrived throughout the day. So 1 commercial flight arrived, transported approximately 110 people to their final destination, which left the community of Red Lake with well over 400 evacuees. Now, keep in mind, we were under the premise that commercial airlines were going to be arriving, and those evacuees would be transported out. Due to circumstances beyond our control, no commercial flights arrived after that. So we had to support well over 400 First Nation people from the community of Sandy Lake, which created a unique situation for us. We didn't have cots. We didn't, and now this is going into early Saturday evening now. We don't have cots. We are not prepared for something like this because we're not a designated hub with the province. So our community came together. Our community emergency management coordinator was able to get 100 cots from the Sioux Lookout area, but that's a 4-hour drive to Red Lake, if you're familiar with the geography of Northwestern Ontario. We had to move people from the airport to our community hall, arena, try to feed everyone, and our community really stepped up. In the essence of everything, the CAO relationship with the mayor is so vitally important, and you have to have that confidence and trust in your CAO, because if you don't have the confidence or the trust, especially during an emergency, you're always in the background questioning, is this right? Is this right? Is this right for the municipality? So we didn't evacuate our community. We accepted, like I said, a large number of people coming into our area. And when we found out the commercial flights were no longer happening throughout the evening, we had to come together and how are we going to house these people, try to make them comfortable, getting them fed, and trying to arrange everything through Emergency Management Ontario the next day for commercial flights for people to get to their final destination. So I'll leave it at that one for now.
Wow, a complex situation indeed, you know, that includes not just your municipality, as you said, but partners from the First Nations as well as from the province.
Correct.
Michelle, what did it look like from the CAO perspective?
Thank you, everyone, and welcome, and good morning to folks in Northwestern Ontario, and good afternoon to the rest of Ontario. Red Lake is an hour behind everyone. The mayor described it admirably. What I can add is that when the call came in at 2 o'clock from our CEMC, who is also our fire chief, he called me, asked if I knew anything about this. I then called the mayor. And so the mayor and I traveled out to the airport, which is about a 10-minute drive from where we are. And I remember saying to the mayor, we've got this. You know, we're a transportation hub. People are coming in. We just have to make sure they're rostered and the manifests are correct. So the people going out to Thunder Bay, Kapuskasing, Cornwall, wherever EMO was going to take them and house them a little bit more permanently than we could. We thought that this was going to be a lot of work, but that it wasn't going to be complicated. And it wasn't until we realized that people were still coming in, and they actually came in up until about, flights came in until about 3 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning. People kept coming in, but there was no flights going out. They weren't landing the Hercules, they weren't landing the 737, there was just one. And we have a very small airport with limited runway space. We actually had to change gears very, very quickly, like within an hour. Okay, we're not just a transportation hub, which is unexpected, but we're now an evacuation center. So we had to house people, elderly people, people with small children. We had to think of medical needs. Families were leaving Sandy Lake without their medication. Their medication was perhaps in luggage on a different plane. So we had to bring EMS in. So within an hour, we had to shift gears. And, you know, as the mayor said, with him and I working very closely together, and I've only been with Red Lake since January. And at that, I do work remotely sometimes. So I'm glad I was in the community during that weekend, be able to help. We had to pull together a group of people very quickly, much more than we realized we were going to need to suddenly make sure that our guests from Sandy Lake Reserve, and as you can imagine, being evacuated is very upsetting to people, especially people with small children. We have people in wheelchairs, we have people in walkers, and we got the first wave, and those were the most vulnerable people. And we had to very quickly change gears and figure out how we're going to make these people comfortable, at least feed them, and see what we could do to make an overnight stay as comfortable as possible.
a quickly evolving situation. That's for sure. And so now I think really getting to the crux of what we try and get at during these sessions, we're really interested in touching on what many of you have already started to speak about, which is that really important mayor-CAO relationship to be able to get through a situation like this. Michelle, maybe you can start to kick us off talking a little bit about communications and roles and responsibilities. So, at a time when managing misinformation and conflicting messages is more important than ever, how did you decide who would address the public and when, and what those messages were, and who might then handle other aspects of communication?
Thank you, Lindsay. That's a good question. In this case, the situation was very isolated and insulated to the airport and to our community center, which was within maybe a kilometer of the airport. So there was outreach to the community. We have a communications person who was actually at the airport helping with the manifests and the registration as the people came off the planes. At some point, she reached out to the community when we realized we're in a crisis situation of having to house people. We reached out to the community for blankets and pillows, for volunteers who would help us in the kitchens at the community center. We want to make sure people are fed, and we had to make sure that there was dietary considerations. So we reached out to the community in that sense. The community wasn't at risk. It wasn't our community that was at risk in crisis. It was the Sandy Lake community. So we reached out. It was a different type of social media posts that we did, and as the mayor said, we got a lot of good input from our churches and our Mennonite community and our friendship center. All the people that would normally volunteer, they came willingly and very quickly to help out with the situation. So the media release wasn't as it normally would be. We didn't have to alert the community that they were in danger. We were just making sure that they could help us, knowing that we were in crisis situation.
Okay. And Mayor Moda, how were you kind of thinking about your role as the mayor during this situation, and particularly from a communications perspective, from a relationships perspective, what was going through your mind in terms of priorities?
Well, a lot of it was, are the planes ever going to stop when they were coming in? Because we were at maximum capacity. So we had discussions with EMO. They already brought one Hercules in, and through the good work of our CAO and discussions with EMO, they were bringing 2 more Hercules into the community. So we're already close to 600 people, but we were fortunate enough they were able to divert those 2 flights to Thunder Bay. I was in constant contact with the chief in Sandy Lake First Nation, reporting on how her residents were doing and what the municipality's doing to be supportive, and if there was anything that she required of us with her residents. The other important piece that I'd like to just mention, and not particularly this instance, but I recall when we totally evacuated our community, people were dying for information. They wanted information all the time. And there was so many different news outlets or people on different social media platforms talking about things that were not necessarily true. So what we arranged when we evacuated our community was every day at 3 p.m., the mayor would come on and give everyone a factual, concrete, and specific update as to the situation. And reflecting back on that, that was probably one of the best things that we did from a communication standpoint, because everyone got the same messaging that was not mixed up through different news outlets or different social media platforms. And we received a lot of positive feedback after that.
Really interesting and important to have that consistency and that trusted voice during a time of crisis. Now, Mayor Alcock and Denise, there must have been some different kinds of communications considerations happening in the event of a cyber attack. Hoping you can start off by talking a little bit about how you each approached your roles during that situation, as well as then kind of how your relationship as mayor and CAO may have evolved as a result of the situation. So maybe Mayor Alcock, I'll ask you to kick things off.
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. It's interesting. I really enjoyed listening to both Fred and Michelle talk about that, what went on in their community. And it's the kind of thing that I find quite inspirational. It's what, good people do in times of crisis. So very cool. And there are a few similarities, but not completely. So the first one being in something like this, it's an incredibly vulnerable time for the entire community and for those who are leading it. So I'm really fortunate that Denise and I have an excellent relationship. And something like this either absolutely strengthens that, or it could fall apart. And in our case, it strengthened it, no question about it, because you can imagine when it's a cyber event and you do have to, the community finds out pretty quickly because it has an immediate impact. One thing we all know about municipal government, we're all in some way connected to it, whether it's your taxes, your building permits, your planning applications, and so many more, right? So everybody's saying, well, what do you mean I can't do? Or does that mean where my personal information, where is it? So everybody is incredibly hypersensitive to what's out there and is it mine? And I need to hear from you ASAP immediately. So one of the things that both Denise and I did, we worked in tandem on all of our messaging, all of our communication. And we have different audiences. It's for our own staff, it's for council. And Denise will tell you about, she broke a golden rule, and we're very proud of her for doing it, to communicate to our council, but also to the public. And so, it's really important that you show a unified and, more importantly, confident front to say, yes, this happened, but you wouldn't believe we have a system in place. And then with this, the part that's really challenging, so is what you're not allowed to say. Because as everybody knows, there are so many legal elements of this, and you bring in third parties that are part of it. It's really important that you empower staff to be able to do what staff are trained, for many of them, are trained to do. And so we immediately had this team of, I was just so incredibly proud, but again, a point I made earlier, I felt so supported from IT, clerks, all of our staff, all of our departments. But one area that, and it speaks, Fred, to what you talked about, and that's consistent messaging, our communications team went into a whole other mode that they hadn't experienced before. I'm not even sure through COVID. I think it's a different team, but we had a daily, it seemed daily, videotaping with the two of us. And we were very scripted because, as a lot of people know, with this particular mayor, she can quite frequently go down on some other path. And I wasn't allowed to do that. So, and I will say from my perspective, I heard nothing but positive feedback from members of the community. They could have been a whole lot more upset with the for a long period of time, the very limited detail that they got. And yet I didn't get calls every day complaining about our messaging. So I think that we did that reasonably well. But as I said, confidence, leadership, communication with all of the stakeholders, council's absolutely critical, and getting it out there with a consistent message to make sure that we don't get into trouble. I think that
Yeah,
I'm
those
sure.
are those are great observations, and it sounded like that, that kind of united front together sounds like a really positive approach to things. Now, Denise, I'm dying to know, what is the golden rule that you broke, and how did it go?
Well, the golden rule was, as you can imagine, we had no access to our systems, no way to communicate. We could have done some phone calls, but most of the information was on our system. And for all of the clerks listening, I hope you don't have a heart attack when I say this, but I set up a group council text message chat because I could. And the first words that I placed in there is, "This is for me to communicate to you. Like, do not respond. Do not talk to one another. This is my channel to communicate to you." So I set that up, and it worked extremely well, just obviously at the beginning, because I had no way to contact my council. And I do have to say, with respect to the communication piece, that the mayor is bang on. It was so important that we were unified, and it wasn't even, staff were fantastic. Council was so supportive. It's the most I have ever felt supported by council, feeling like they had the confidence in certainly the mayor and I to manage the situation and to lead our team through it. But the biggest challenge was the press, the media, the pressure, which I'm sure we've all experienced before. And I remember our legal counsel, who sat on our cyber team through our response plan, was saying, do not let them pressure you. Like, you need to stay consistent and firm and stick to your messaging, and whatever you do, do not feel pressured. So I think for the mayor and I, that was certainly something that was in our mind every step of the way, because the mayor was getting calls, I was getting calls. And the video was fun. We obviously had never done it before. Our communications team was instrumental, absolutely amazing in making sure that we could keep people informed as much as possible. So that is the piece that, I certainly take away, is don't feel pressured, stay consistent, remain unified, because it gives the community a sense of confidence that you've got this. And I feel that's what happened with us. As for the relationship, as Mayor Alcock noted, I've had the privilege and pleasure of working with Nancy for, I think it's almost 10 years now, but 2 of those as Mayor-CAO Relationship. And I can honestly say that even though we had a strong relationship before, I think after the cyber incident, it definitely was strengthened, because during that time, I feel we both felt very vulnerable. It was something new. We had a lot of pressure. We had a lot of things we were responsible for. And I feel like we kind of just held each other up when we needed to. And there was no judgment. There was no, question of weakness or inability to carry out our roles. And it just, I know I felt very supported, certainly with Mayor as well, with members of council. So just very comforting to know that when the rubber hits the road, that I had the mayor and council backing me 100%. So that was important.
That's so wonderful. Yeah, I can imagine that having that support when you are being relied upon to support everyone else is so critical. And Denise, you touched a bit on this earlier about the impact on staff and staff morale during these times of crisis. Do you have any tools or practices that you could speak to that helped you maintain some staff morale inside your organization while everyone was clearly facing immense public scrutiny?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lindsay. So I think the biggest thing for our staff was they were all terrified what was going to happen. They couldn't do their job for the most part, and they were very worried about, are you going to lay us off? What's going to happen? We can't access our systems. And I think just to be able to confirm to them, no, we still need you here. We need you as our team. And we have a lot of things like our paper files were completely digitized. Like they were able to scan it into a separate system. They were digitized. We organized. We got the things that you never have time to do. We took full advantage of. And we just kept reassuring our team that no, this will be short-lived. We need you here to get us back on track once the systems come up and running. And in the meantime, we need to get our paper files and our systems organized. So, and the communication was, again, with our team was really important with what was going on and what was happening. And we might have been able to give them a little bit more information than we were able to obviously disseminate into the community. But it was all about a balance of determining what information they could have, but giving them just enough that they just felt that calmness and that satisfaction that, you know what, we're going to be okay. Like we're going to be okay. And so I think for me, it's obviously a very delicate balance, but we communicated as often as we could. And one of the venues that I used, again, once our systems were up and running, which our IT team did really well at getting it active, was video messaging for my team. So I did video messaging probably every 2 weeks, and they could see that I felt confident and everything was going to be okay and they had nothing to worry about. And I think that's probably what helped them through that point in time.
Denise, just a quick thing. I also, it occurred to me that one of the other things I think that helped maybe in the community more so than staff, and that was IT did a fantastic job at trying to segregate out there was one department that actually was up and running very quickly. Wasn't it building? I think it was the first one out the gate. And so as soon as there was one that could be isolated and yes, we can get back to business, they said, yep, green light, go ahead. And I think from a community perspective, and certainly from a council perspective, we were able to show progress. We're not now completely frozen and it's going to be months. They did everything in their power to bring back some normalcy to municipal government. And that I think was, if you look in retrospect, probably was a really good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. Thanks so much. Michelle, from the perspective of supporting your staff and maintaining that morale under these kind of periods of intense scrutiny, any tips or observations from your perspective?
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. What I should say, when we knew we had to pull our emergency group together, what we realized was that our treasurer was in Manitoba, our clerk was in BC, our director of operations was in Kenora, and other alternates were also out of the community. It was just a normal Saturday. I actually happened to be in the office working, but others were doing what they do on Saturdays. So what I was able to do is pull other people together who wouldn't normally have jobs in the emergency control group, our communications person, our planner, our director of HR, and some other folks that I brought in who stepped up and helped out where they needed to help out, took some leadership roles, which I was very, very proud of. And I continued to support them through the whole event. I would say the mayor and I got very little sleep on Saturday night. I know I got about 2 hours. I went home and then I got called out to the community center at about 3 a.m. and then tried to go home again. And I'm not sure. I think the mayor went home, but I'm not sure he slept. So, we made sure, however, that the other staff and our other volunteers went home. And what sometimes happens is people are in the moment and they don't want to leave. They're tired after 10 or 12 hours and they say, no, I can stay a little bit longer. But I took a stance and said, no, you are going home. We have someone else to replace you. So we support, and I said, you're going home because we need you tomorrow as well. So go home and get some good sleep. So we supported our staff and volunteers in that way. And And the people that weren't in the community that wished they were here were too far away, and they felt very bad for not being able to participate. So I made sure that there was no guilt there. They just happened to be out of the community. One of the things we actually haven't done, and the mayor might touch on this, is we actually haven't done a debrief. So the week after the event, we were all still trying to catch up on sleep and sort things out. Last week I was out of the community. So this week or next week, we're going to pull a group of people together, our APART manager, our CEMC, all of the folks that helped, including our volunteer firefighters, people that participate and took on roles like transportation and food and housing and all the things that needed to be attended to during the event. And we're going to talk about what are the wins, what were the challenges, and what are the lessons learned. So we want to make sure our staff have a voice in that as well, because they lived it. So I hope that was helpful. I don't know if the mayor would want to add anything to that.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you goes a long way. When you personally say that to somebody and thank them for coming out, staff or volunteers. But staff, sometimes we make assumptions, not that it's right, but it's part of their job. And I think a personal thank you goes a long way. That, along with recognizing everyone, and we're talking about having a community barbecue for everyone that came out and volunteered as an appreciation. The other piece, just outside of staff a bit, but staying on the same philosophy, Lindsay, was the morale of the Sandy Lake residents that were here. So we also had to deal with that type of situation. And what I mean by that is, earlier on in the evening, as I explained, people were unsure if they were going to another destination. Now, don't forget, these 569 people just fled a forest fire that grew 25 kilometers overnight and was infringing their community. So they needed to get out. So now they're in a small airport, they're in a community, their final destination is not known until they get onto the plane, and they had lots of questions. So staff, the CAO, everyone worked very well to assist them and, you know, make them as comfortable as possible. So that was a challenge for us too.
Such an interesting dimension to have guests in your community like that. So one last question before we move to the audience Q's and A's. I think it's just a general question of looking back. What do you wish you'd had in place before the crisis hit? How might you provide advice to others who are thinking about preparing for emergency situations? And I wonder, Mayor Moda, if you might kick us off, just because it seems like you've been through so many of these different emergencies.
I tell you, Red Lake, but we learn something every time. And it's actually interesting on preparation. So back in 2020, when we evacuated 5,000 people in about 30 minutes, at that point in time, we learned how we require something called an emergency alert system. So when everyone returned, staff got together with our debriefings and everything, we created an emergency alert system. And the emergency alert system hits every cell phone. It's similar to the province when they send it out for a missing child or something like that. But everybody that signs up, they get an emergency alert as to what's happening and directions on what to do. We've also ensured our vulnerable sector has also signed up with municipal staff, along with the elderly who requires assistance. So if you have a large geographic community, you want to know what residents need assistance first. The other piece I'll just touch on is what we wish happened. We wish we had the information sooner to this particular evacuation that happened in order for us to prepare. But of course, every emergency is different. we're in the process of updating our emergency plan as well too. So, we need to ensure we have our volunteer lists and things like that. So people we can count on, especially when a lot of staff are out of the community, because the emergency doesn't happen on a Tuesday at noon. It's always going to happen on some sort of different time in the middle of the night or on the weekend. That being said, we want to understand from Emergency Management Ontario, we were chosen as the closest airport, but we were not designated as a hub. So what does that mean for other communities in Northwestern Ontario? If they're not designated as a hub, does that mean people from First Nations will be transported to those municipalities even though they're not designated? So we need to understand that and what that looks like moving forward. But I'll flip it over to Michelle.
Did you want me to say something, Lindsay? I know that you want time, but yes. If the question is looking back, what do you wish we had in place? I agree. I wish we had more time to prepare, but we didn't, and it worked. We made it work. Was our volunteer list up to date? Not quite. Did we know that our staff were out of the community? Well, normally they don't have to have permission to be out of the community on a weekend. And there's a few things that I think we're going to find when we do our debriefing, how we ran our meetings, how we ran our emergency control group. And also what happened is, we probably didn't mention, is Emergency Management Ontario brought in people. They arrived about 11 o'clock on Friday night, along with a company called Loomis, who actually took over manifesting people when they were leaving. We didn't want to lose track of people. And the Sandy Lake Chief Dolores was very concerned that we had accountability for every person, every baby, every dog and cat. Oh, dogs and cats arrived as well. So we had to take care of some animals. So those are the things that we're going to think about. Hopefully this never happens again, but Red Lake has a beautiful airport, and we could be a transportation hub. So we want to make sure that we're prepared next time and we have all the pieces in place. Thank you.
Thanks. And Mayor Alcock, I know you talked about how you did have a great plan and supports in place. Anything else you wish that you would have had, or anything that was particularly helpful?
No, but well, I should never say no, but because one always learns, for sure. And one of the things I would say is, our neighboring municipalities, everybody went like, whew, as to Denise's point earlier. Well, we like being number one, but this one wasn't so great, right? And they said, they all were quite reflective and said, we know it's not if, it's when. And so if they were all, I know, Denise, you can talk about the details about what you did on a daily basis with our neighbors and keeping them informed. But we were really fortunate. We did have a plan in place with respect to a cyber event. We had the right policies, insurance, things like that in place. So I felt unbelievably grateful that our staff were all over that. It's never 100%. So always review those policies with council to make sure that we're where we need to be. Training, we all get training all the time. I also sit on district council. We, throughout the region, we have regular cyber modules to go through as just part of what we do. And I know that I think some municipalities do more of that than others. I would say be one of the ones that does more of that, because hackers are getting better. They're changing all the time. And those little training sessions are really, really valuable. The last thing I'll say is, we have always thought that communications and having a strong communications team that works with council and back and forth, what's important, what we want to get out there, has always been important. This really hit home we're on the right track with that one. And lastly is this point of trust your staff. If you've been working with them on all of this stuff, trust them, empower them, and it'll make your life as an elected official much, much better. And, from a vulnerable position to a feeling of, you said it earlier, Denise, we can get through this, and we can get through it with confidence, with our community behind us. So that I guess those are the things I would take away.
Thanks. And Denise, anything to add? Yeah.
Yeah, just a few comments. Thank you, Lindsay. So definitely the key thing was your cyber incident response plan. I cannot stress it enough. You absolutely need one of them if you don't have them. A few takeaways for us were, and part of that plan is making sure that you have the key people, we call it, in the war room working on it. So experts that can help you get through it. So you're not looking to procure that support as the incident's happening. So be prepared. The other thing that I think from an operational perspective, we did have some takeaways. Even though our protocol is very focused on stopping the incident and protecting our IT and infrastructure, we did have some operational areas that we needed to work on and put some processes in place. Keep in mind, we couldn't even pay our staff. We couldn't pay our staff. We had no way of getting that through the system. So we had to put some, processes in place that helped us do that. So we did look at enhancing our protocol and including things to execute essential tasks in a limited environment. So I think that's extremely important. The other thing you have to remember is this was a big elephant. You had to eat it one bite at a time, and you had to take it day by day, because this is something that we are still finalizing the details on. We've been well over a year. So take the time, be prepared, and make sure that you have good investment in your IT infrastructure. It will be the best money ever spent. And our council has been very supportive and continues to be supportive of that. So those are my last words of advice.
Great advice from everyone. Thanks so much. We've got a few audience questions. Here's one that starts out with a compliment. I find it impressive that your municipalities, which are not large, were able to handle these emergencies so well. Did you need to hire any contract staff to support your response efforts, like crisis communications advisors or other staff to help out, either in the short, medium, or longer term? Anyone like to take this one?
I think I'm going to kick that one over to Denise, because without going into too much of what we're not supposed to talk about, maybe Denise can give a sense of that crisis management team right from the get-go, and as much as you can, because that's a really great question.
Right. So thank you. So it goes back to having your plan in place and having identified a team. So on our team, we had a representative through our insurance company. We had a representative through legal. We had cyber representative through cyber. And that team was the one that we followed through the entire way. They were the ones that made the decisions, gave us the guidance, told us what we should and shouldn't say. So in a cyber situation, make sure that you are surrounded by experts to help guide you. I think that's extremely important.
How about Red Lake?
I could maybe speak to that. I would say the answer is no to that question. This was a very intense and short-lived, although it didn't seem to be at the time. It happened from a Saturday to a Sunday evening. I think the last of our guests from Sandy Lake left around 6 o'clock on Sunday evening. But by that time, we knew people were leaving, so we weren't worried about sleepovers and cots and that kind of thing. We did get really good support from Emergency Management Ontario and their support system, who is a company called Loomis, and they initiated, as I said, all the manifests for people leaving on the plane, where they were going. Families were very concerned about being separated, because we didn't know whether people were going to Kapuskasing or Thunder Bay or Cornwall, and families were very concerned about staying together. So Loomis and Emergency Management Ontario provided that support. So I would say no, in this situation, we didn't have to hire consultants or anyone else to help us. If it had extended beyond the Sunday and into the Monday and into the week, we would have had to bring in extra staff and extra consultants to help us.
Now, here's an interesting one that kind of talks about the right balance of continuing on with the all hands on deck from an emergency perspective, but then kind of, not losing sight of the regular business. So the question is, at the end of the event, long or short, how do you help your small staff complement focus on returning to regular business quickly and with energy? We recently had a devastating ice storm. I think many on the call might be able to relate to that, resulting in a 9-day power outage for most residents. Our team implemented our plan amazingly, but it was all hands on deck and we were exhausted by the end. Residents who weren't impacted or got their power on quickly had little tolerance to be told their services would have to wait until we finished cleanup. Are folks kind of seeing any parallels with some of the experiences that you've had? Any advice for folks on the line?
So I think for Huntsville, it's a little different in the sense that we actually had a fairly small core team working on the cyber incident. So the only effect that our team, no, besides our IT team and our finance team, there were certain departments that were very, very much impacted. But for the most part, our general staff complement weren't severely impacted. As soon as things were up, they got working again, but they weren't working overtime. It did really affect our IT department, our communications, and our finance. And I think it was just, and again, as I noted earlier, we're well over a year and we're still working with them to deal with those effects of that incident. So I think it's just providing the right supports. We did have someone come in and talk to those departments that were highly impacted by the incident. And I think it's just to recognize that that support might not just be during the time or shortly thereafter, but it might continue on. So keep checking in with them and providing them with the support that they need.
Great. Oh, did anyone have anything to add on that, or should I go to the last question?
I would just echo the comment I made earlier, Lindsay, about the importance of bringing back very quickly some of the regular activities of municipal government. If people, it's seamless and okay, planning was down for a week, but people were able to submit their applications or building permits or whatever it is that they would normally do. If that had shut down for any length of time, then people would start getting antsy, right? And so I think just bringing back some normalcy as quickly as possible is a really good idea.
That's great. Fred, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure, not specifically about this recent incident, but going back when we evacuated the community, the M&R implemented an order where nobody was allowed back in the geography of the municipality until the green light was given. So people were out of the municipality for approximately a week. And of course, when people are returning, they want their potholes filled or whatever that looks like. But that being said, it comes down to, again, about clear, concise communication with the public that we're recuperating from the event, the same as Huntsville, we're recuperating. It's going to take us a bit of time. Please be patient with staff. And if you have any concerns, please forward them to the appropriate personnel and we will get to them as soon as possible. But understand, we are still in a recovery process at this time. So a lot of people get anxious wanting to get back to the normalcy of day-to-day activities. But as Denise and Nancy shared, that's not always the case. But of course, we want to help our residents as soon as possible, but it does take time, especially after significant events.
Wonderful. Well, I think that we are now out of time. This has been such a wonderful session. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for for providing their insights and sharing some of what must have been some pretty challenging times in the roles that you're in. As we close our session today, I'm wondering if each of you has any parting words of wisdom for the folks on the line today. And who should I pick on first? Oh, I saw Nancy come off mute.
I
Nancy.
just wanted to say I feel like I've shared whatever I had, but I want to thank you for doing this, because I actually think it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk about these things. The message is communication, and communication for so many different things. The more we know, the better whatever the situation will be. So I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you
So much. Anyone else?
Sure, I'll step ahead, Lindsay. To echo Mayor Alcock, communication for sure. I mean, communication is the essence of any relationship. But when we talk specifically about the mayor-CAO relationship, there has to be that growth and trust. And, that comes with time. It's not going to happen 2 weeks into a new CAO, for example. But you get a feel for somebody. And if we've worked with different people all throughout our lives, you get that feeling, and you know that you can work with somebody. And as time progresses and the trust builds, you instill all of those thoughts, feelings that, yeah, I have complete confidence in the person in this role. And I know they will have my back. I know they will have the community's back, council's back, moving forward. So once you get there, you'll know you're there. And because you kind of take a step back and watch everything happen around you. So trust, build that relationship, communicate, and everyone's working for the benefit of all of our 444 municipalities in the province, and we want everyone to succeed. How about I leave it at that?
Wonderful closing. Michelle?
I'm not, that's a hard act to follow. And
I know, sorry about that.
I think it's very interesting that Denise and Nancy have worked together for 10 years. And Fred, Mayor Moda, and I have worked together for 6 months. And yet the trust and the relationship that we have almost feels like a long term, like an old married couple, perhaps, Fred. But we do get along. When we disagree on something, we do it respectfully. But the emergency that we had recently, and the one that we had in January that the mayor referred to early on, we worked very well together, and we made things happen. We didn't step on each other's toes. We knew our role, and we made sure that everyone else we felt that it was our job to support everyone else and make sure everything got done. And I think it did. And I think we were successful with the emergency as best we could under the circumstances.
Wonderful. And Denise, last but not least.
Well, thank you. I support all of the comments that have been made, and I think the most important one is certainly having the trust, and to Michelle's point is making sure you do understand roles, because if that's not clear, that's when conflict evolves, and there's enough going on when there's a crisis to not add additional conflict to that. So again, very fortunate. My council and my mayor is very supportive in the administrative roles that I need to carry out, and keeping those communications open. Your mayor should never be surprised about anything, and I think we did a really great job keeping the communications open. So get your plan, train your staff, invest in infrastructure, and build on your relationship with your mayor. Super important.
Wonderful. Thanks so much to our panelists, and thanks so much to everybody who joined us on the line today for your great questions. Thank you to OMAA for being such a great partner in all of this, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.